So in this case, what we'll be doing is we'll be reading a file. Actually, no, not this one. In this case, we have a list of numbers. So I'll open up the file really quick. We have this list of numbers and we want to find out a couple of details from these numbers. So first, we want all the negative numbers in ascending order surrounded by these square brackets. We want a single number that's the average of all the positive numbers divisible by 6, which is very fun. And we also want a list of all numbers greater than 600 as they appear in the list, but printed in reverse order. So that's also something that we need to do. Yeah, so let's just get started with the first one. Does anyone have any idea of how we might do this? List all the negative numbers. Yeah, negative numbers. Yeah, so we can use the filters. So arrays in JavaScript have this filter method, which your autocomplete will be super helpful for. And it takes in a function that should return true when you want to keep that value. So in our filter function, we get 3 arguments. You can kind of see in my autocomplete here. So we get the value, the index, and we also get the array. In this case, we only really care about the value. So I'll take out the value only. Yep. And we want to keep only the positive numbers. Oh, no, sorry, all the negative numbers. So that's all the numbers less than 0. So we want to return values less than 0. So this should give us all the negative numbers. Okay. And now what we want to do is we want to sort them in ascending order. So for sorting list of numbers, we have this convenient method on arrays called sort. Unfortunately, by default, sort doesn't work like you might expect it to. It won't sort numbers in ascending order. It will sort the elements in the array in lexicographical order. So that just means the order that you'll find them in like a dictionary. Unfortunately, what that means is numbers like, I think 10 or like 100 will come before 20 because 100 starts with 1. And in a dictionary, I guess, 1 comes before 20. So if you sort lexicographically, 100 will get sorted before a 20, which isn't always what you want. So in order to get around that, let me just format the code a bit nicely. We can pass in a function to sort. And yeah, so autocomplete gives us some help again. So it takes in a compare function that takes in 2 numbers. That receives 2 numbers and we return another number. So A, B, like this. The way that sorting works is that if you return like a positive number, it will assume that A is greater than B. If it's a negative number, it will assume B is greater than A. And if you return 0, then it will assume that they're equal. This is useful as well because like you might not always just be sorting numbers or strings. You might also want to sort like complex objects. So you can create your custom sort functions to sort however you want. In this case, we want to sort in ascending order. So we want the return value to be positive if A is greater than B. So we can just return A minus B, I think. Yeah, so that should work. And just for like a quick sanity check, I'm going to store this in a variable called negative sorted numbers. And I'm just going to console log this out. Yeah, so in case none of you know, the way you can actually run node, or I guess JavaScript files locally on your, in your terminal is use the node command. So this is just like Python, or like the Python command. The node command takes in the file that you want to run. So if I run node data.js, it should give me all the negative numbers in ascending order. And that's what we expect. Something I guess kind of nice that you'll notice is that we get some decent formatting. Obviously, this isn't what we want because we want it to be more like this. So I guess all on the same line. Yeah, so what we can do to solve this is we can, I guess what we have to do actually is we need to make a giant string of all the numbers. And the way we can, so one of the easiest ways we can do that is by using the join method. So if we use the join, we can, it accepts a separator and it will just concatenate all the elements as strings. So if I add a comma space as a separator, I save my file. And if I run this again, we'll see that we get a bit closer to what we want to print out. Now, all we need is the square brackets around the array that we're printing out. And there are a couple of ways to do this. We can add just like square brackets like this, and then add it to the end as well. But this isn't the nicest way to do it. The way I'd recommend like combining strings or like interpolating values into strings is by using this template literal syntax. So to do this, you use the backtick, which is over the tab button or your tab key. And when you want to interpolate a value, use $ curly brackets. So this lets you put arbitrary JavaScript inside the string. In this case, it will be whatever this negative sorted numbers.join returns. And we can just add square brackets around that. And now it's a bit more clear exactly what we're printing out. In this case, it wouldn't have been too bad anyway, but if you have more complex strings that you're trying to create, this is definitely very helpful. So if we run this now, we get like the correct format. If we want, we can also copy these, copy this part and just paste it right here. Now we get exactly what the expected output is. Okay. Next, we want to get a single number that's the average of all positive numbers divisible by 6. Sorry, can I explain line 17? Yeah. Line 17. Yeah. So the sort function takes in 2 elements of the array, and it returns, and you need to return a number based on whether, I guess, these 2 elements. So I'm just going to call them A and B because that's what you'll see them most of the time. So whether A is greater than, less than, or equal to B. If, yeah. So the way that it understands the return value is that if the return value is positive, it assumes that A is greater than B. If the return value is negative, it assumes that A is less than B. And if the return value is 0, it assumes that A and B are like equivalent in sorting order. Does that explain your, sorry, does that answer your question? Yeah, all good. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll move on to the next part. We want to get the average of all the numbers that are divisible by 6, of all the positive numbers divisible by 6. So we can do this, we can do a similar thing. So we'll get, we'll filter the numbers, filter. This time, we only want to get the positive numbers. And I'll use a bit of a different syntax here. You'll see that I don't have the curly brackets. And this is like a more succinct way of expressing this exact, or almost this exact thing. If you basically open up your curly brackets just to return a single value, you can, I guess, cut down your lines of code a little bit to this. But I guess functionally, there's no real difference. Next, we want to get the average, right? So to get the average, we need to sum them all together. So there are a couple of ways we can sum the numbers. We can just like loop through and then add them all together. But there's a nice function called reduce. And this takes your entire list and reduces it to a single value according to the function that you provided. So the arguments that it takes is a function and the original number, or the original value, which defaults to 0. So the function, let me just format this a little bit. Sorry, write out some boilerplate. So it takes this function, which should return the next like accumulator value, and it takes an initial value. You don't need to provide this initial value, but in general, it's a good idea because it makes your code a bit more clear. And what the function you pass to reduce here would be, yeah, so filter here would just be the function name. The filter means like it's a method of the variable numbers. Yeah, so numbers is an array. And just like you've probably seen in other, I guess, more object-oriented languages like Python or Java, you can declare like instance methods. And what filter does is it accepts a function as the first argument, because in JavaScript, functions are first-class citizens, so you can pass them around just like you would any other variable. So what we can, I guess this might illustrate my point a bit better, but we can like chuck this in a a variable. So if we call this like filter positive, we can just chuck it in a variable, and then we can pass filter positive as the actual filter function. And this will work the exact same. But yeah, you can't use filter for any variable. It has to be an array. Yeah, so this is something that comes up sometimes as well, because when you use document.query selector, it returns an object that's very similar to an array, but it's not in the ways that are probably the most annoying. So it doesn't have methods like filter and map and sort and stuff. So sometimes you'll need to convert the result of document.query selector, document.query selector all. You'll need to convert the return value of that into an array before you can use all these like nice methods. Yep, so let's continue with this. So we want to add all the positive values together. And what the callback to reduce takes in is you get an accumulator. You get the current value, and we return the next accumulator value. So in this case, we want to add all the numbers together. Our initial accumulator is 0. And in order to, I guess, add them all together, we want to add the current value onto the accumulator. So we can just return accumulator plus current. And if we want it to be a bit more concise, we can delete these curly brackets and delete the return value, the return keyword. Delete that. And this accomplishes the same thing as having the curly brackets and the return keyword. So this gives us the sum of the numbers, but we also want the length, right? Because we want to compute the average. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to store this in a variable. So I'm going to call positive numbers as this, and then we can get the sum by reducing over positive numbers because it's still the same array. And I'm realizing now that I forgot to do the part where we need to check that they're divisible by 6. So what we can do is we can just add another filter on to the end of this. So we can filter value percentage 6 equals 0. And this makes sure that I'm sure you've all seen this modular operator before. It just gives you the remainder when you divide the first value by the second value. Yeah. So now that we have the sum, we can get the average by dividing the sum by the length of the number of numbers that we have. So say constant average equals sum over positive numbers dot length. I'm realizing that I did a typo here. I guess cool tip or whatever. If you hit F2 on your keyboard, you get this like little prompt and you can rename variables. I'll try to rename them like pretty smartly. So you can see I renamed this to positive with the correct spelling, and it renamed it here and here as well. This is a good practice in JS to have multiple functions in one line. So do you mean like multiple functions like this? Does that mean one line to you? Yeah, so I guess I'll touch on that a little bit later, but this is okay. But it kind of depends, right? Like this would be bad because it's a bit difficult to see what's going on. But having them over separate lines is okay, in my opinion, because you can read down the page to see what's going on. It would obviously probably be better to like have these in named functions, just like filter positive, which I'm realizing now is actually filter negative. But yeah, it really depends on the situation. And I'll touch on something a bit more important when I'm done with this specific exercise. And it's something that you probably won't need to keep in mind, but it can come in handy if you have some performance issues. So I think we should have the average now. So let's just copy this. Copy that. Let's console.log. Again, I'm going to use this template string syntax, so that uses backticks. I can paste my string and then use $ curly brackets to log out the average. And if I now go to my terminal and I run node data.js, we should get something that I hope is correct. Yeah. So the next, I guess the last thing is we want to get all the numbers greater than 600 as they appear in the list, but printed in reverse order. So what we can do is, well, first we want all the numbers that are greater than 600. So this one's pretty simple, as you've seen here before. We can get do numbers.filter, filter value greater than 600. That's okay. And then we want to print them in reverse order. So JavaScript, I think, provides a reverse function. Yep. And it returns the array. So I think this is basically all we need to do. And again, we can just copy what we've done here, pretty much, to print out the values in the format that we expect. So I'm just going to copy this. Yep. So, and I guess just to show you that you can put arbitrary JavaScript, I'm going to put this inside the curly brackets and then join them like inline here. Obviously, it would be better. It would probably be better to extract this out into its own variable because it'd be easier to read the code. Like obviously you have to like actually read the code to know what's going on here instead of like a properly named variable. For example, large numbers in reverse would make more sense. But yeah, just to show you that you can put arbitrary JavaScript inside the curly brackets, like inside your $ curly brackets in template literals. I'm just gonna like leave this inline. And if we run our code, we should get a bunch of numbers that are greater than 600. Yeah. So something that I wanted to touch on is that a lot of these functions that we've used actually create a copy of the array. So I guess the only one here that creates a copy is actually filter. Whenever you use filter, it creates a copy of the array, which I'm sure all of you understand will allocate more memory. So that can be a bad thing if you don't use this carefully. So if we wanted to be like super memory conscious, we would combine these two functions into a single one so that we only create an array once. Like I guess conversely, sort and reverse don't actually do that. And I'm pretty sure sort and reverse actually do the thing in place. And I guess you can see here, this method mutates the array and returns a reference to the same array. If we hover over filter, I think it should tell us something different. It doesn't tell us that it creates a new array, but yeah, so filter will create a new array with only the elements in the that pass the like filter function. Yep. So does all of that make sense? Any questions before we move on?